All right, we're recording. Hey, I'm Randy. I'm the Chief Audio Man, and here with us today, the one and only, all the way from the UK, Taryn, the British audiophile. How are you, man?
Yeah, really good, Randy. You?
I'm doing great. I can't complain about anything.
All set for the holiday season?
Yeah, well, I'm never quite ready. There's still some shopping to do and things like that. I don't know. You got kids? You got all the shopping done?
Well, the missus is doing the most of it. I got the Santa stuff a little while ago, so that was the big stuff. Got that out of the way, and then there's a lot of other running around you have to do. So it's a lot more work than she does the heavy lifting. So I can't complain too much.
Are you going to build like a playhouse in the backyard or anything like that?
Yeah, not likely. He's got a little playroom there, which I use sometimes to set up secondary systems to run them in.
Okay.
So that's his domain.
Yeah.
And he's 8 years old, and I have to knock now when I want to go in.
Because you listen to your ProAct speakers or something in there?
Yeah, I'm not sure what he makes of them really. I tell him not to chase the dog around them. That's what I say.
Okay.
If you want to chase the dog, do it somewhere else, not near the main hi-fi. Go and do it in your playroom.
That's right. So I'm sure if you know British audiophile, if you know me at all, but Taryn's got a great channel, and he talks mostly about cables, burn-in, power supplies, no speakers, no head. No, I'm kidding. He talks about it. He's got some really good, really good videos. Actually, the videos I really enjoyed were when you compared the switching power supply to the linear,
right?
And then I loved your cable.
Oh wow,
the cable video. I mean, it was so thorough.
Thank you. Yeah, that was a bit of an ordeal.
Yeah. How long did that take to make?
Well, the filming wasn't so bad. That was done in the summer holidays.
No, but I mean the evaluation.
The evaluation bit, that was a mistake, really. I'm not going to evaluate 5 cables at the same time again. That's just.
I don't know how you even what were you listening for when you're doing that?
Well, I just basically I had my chord signatures that I've had for I don't know, over 10 years probably, and I'm familiar with those. I've tried other cables. I've got other cables, so I thought it started by me basically. People ask me for advice on cables, and I've always said just go for a decent pro audio cable. That's what the studios use. You can get them for 30, 40 quid, which is probably inside $50.
Yeah.
And if they does the job for the studios, I think you won't go too wrong. And people have used them, always given me very good feedback, and I've heard it in other people's systems. I thought I've never really evaluated them at home myself. I should really find out.
Yeah.
And so there's a company called Designer Cable that does this stuff. They got nothing to do with the audiophile. They tend to deal with the pro audio side of things, but I was aware of them, so I got in touch with them. They sent me the cables, and I thought, right, I'll have a listen. But it's hard work. Just do 2. My advice to you viewers: do 2 cables. Just pick one cable other than yours and evaluate them.
What was the biggest surprise coming out of that for you?
Well, like I said, I didn't have a horse in the race. I honestly couldn't care less whether the 50-pound cable sounded better than the 800-pound. So the thing that was the biggest surprise to me was that the 3 pro audio cables within a gnat's whisker all measure the same. So if you look at their resistance, their capacitance and inductance values, there should be no difference whatsoever. And the Belden and the Mogami, and 3, the other one was Van Dam, but Belden and Mogami are probably better known. They were 2 polar opposites in terms of tonality. And I thought, okay. And then you hear all the kind of objectivist stuff, and you think, is this in my head? Am I making this up? This is, is it so? But I didn't have. You have to do these things. It's a subjective test, but you have to do it as thoroughly as you possibly can. So I know that, and as informed with the scientific processes as you possibly can, even though you're not doing a double-blind trial.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, I can't rely on my short-term memory because I know that that's not reliable enough. So you can't do a 5-minute demo, and you're either going to have to do very quick A/B switching with some switching mechanism and someone else doing it for you, which wasn't an option for me because there's no one here to do that.
Your son can do it.
Yeah, that would be good.
Rip
At 8 years
down.
rip it all, connect it all up. And I can't get
Okay.
the missus to do it either.
Yeah.
So as I said, she barely picks up the right remote control to operate the telly. So that's not going to happen. So
I'm like the remote control IT guy over here. I just hear, Randy, TV's not working. Because I have it all hooked up. So I have like a Apple TV going into Marant's home theater receiver, going into a smart TV. And if any one of them decides to be cantankerous, then it messes up the whole line. And so there's a lot of turning off, turning on. So anyway,
she could, even before I started the channel, when I just had my exposure amp, there was only one amp on the rack, and all you had to do was, the DAC was set, all you had to do was switch the input. Sometimes what happens is with the exposure amp is it switches inputs. If you press the wrong button on the TV remote, it switches the input on the amp. So all you have to do is switch that back. So all she had to do was figure that one thing out. That didn't happen. So now there's 3 or 4 amplifiers, and she doesn't know which one's connected. You can forget it. It's not happening.
Taryn,
She rang me.
My story.
She once rang me on Turkey. I was playing golf with my dad. He goes every year.
Yeah.
And he took me with him, and she rang me up saying, "We've got people around. I can't operate the stereo.
Yeah.
Can you walk me through it?"
Yeah.
So that's what I did. But anyway, so I got her to do a little bit of a blind. Well, she did a proper blind test actually. It was just fortuitous. She walked in. I was playing her favorite track. It was my Pro Axe on my exposure, and she knows that track because I play it all the time. And she sat down, and she'd come back, and she'd sat down, and she said, "This doesn't sound right." And I didn't say anything. I just sat there. It's my. I said to her, "It's my system, the Pro Axe and the exposure. You're not listening to anything else." She said, "No, something sounds different."
Huh.
And she just walked in and sat down literally within a minute and said that. I said, "Really?" So I literally then thought, okay, I'm going to remove myself from iShot. So, and I said to her, "Do you know what? I'm just trying out some cables. They're not supposed to make that much difference. I'm going to try them out. You tell me if I switch them. I won't always switch them."
Yeah.
So I didn't, but you tell me if I switch them and which one you like and why, what you hear. Did it about half a dozen times. Same track, switch the cables quicker than I could have. It's probably true what they say about women's hearing being more sensitive than men's. Quicker than I could have picked up. 6 out of 6.
Wow.
And that was between. So that was between the Megami and the chord signatures.
That's cool. When I get, if I have a headphone or a speaker that I think is awesome, I'll have either my wife or my older teenage daughter sit down, and I won't say a word. I'll just put it on their head or turn the track on, and I say, "What do you hear?" And then one time my wife was like, "I hear everything," and that was, it's so telling for me when you have someone that's not particularly interested like we are, to get their feedback. And it's almost a very reasonable, organic feedback of, I hear this, or this, where it's so obvious to them. And even to a layman, they can hear a difference. And I always get a kick out of that.
Yeah, no, she couldn't articulate it in the ways. So I had to kind of, but I thought, okay, I've got an opportunity. Don't try and influence anything. Right. Don't lead her in any way with any questioning. Just keep it very open. What do you hear? And just get her to elaborate. She said, "Oh, one sounds cleaner." And I thought the one that she said sounds cleaner, which was the chord signature. I thought it doesn't necessarily sound cleaner, in my opinion. I wouldn't describe that category as that characteristic as cleaner, because the Megami is very clean. So I said, "What do you mean by cleaner?" And I was not sat in iShot, so she couldn't see me. I deliberately parked myself. I said, "I don't want you to look at me." And just, she knew roughly what, she's a psychologist. She understands roughly. I said, "I'm just doing a little test evaluation. I don't want you to influence you. I'm just going to sit out of." So I sat behind, with the couches here, and I sat on the dining table over there. So I was behind her. And said, "What do you mean by cleaner?" She says, "More separate. I can hear the instruments more separate, and the instrument separation is better."
Very cool.
It's very, very interesting, really.
Well,
the 3.
Go ahead.
Sorry, go on. No, I said the 3 Pro cables measured exactly the same, but didn't sound the same. There's you can't account for that, can you?
No, that's crazy. I was just going to ask though, like, at what point do you sit down and you're like, "I'm going to put a video up on YouTube, talk about audio. And I know we've talked a little bit back and forth about kind of your background, but
Yeah.
for the folks out there, you know, just how did you get started?
Well, I was watching videos really on
Mm-hmm.
YouTube, and I thought, I've picked up a little bit of knowledge,
Mm-hmm.
and there's stuff that gets talked about, and there's stuff that doesn't get talked about. So I think there's probably something, but I was kind of a bit intimidated by it, really, to tell you the truth. I thought this is not I don't do any social media. Like, you know, people say, manufacturers say, well, where can we, you know, we would have contacted you months ago if we knew where we could contact you from.
Right.
Because I don't do any Facebook, Twitter, nothing on social media. And I have, you know, the video, they were shot on my iPad up until probably, you know, 6-8 months ago.
Yeah.
So the production quality was, you know, lousy.
Yeah.
But then Steve did his thing, Steve Gutenberg, and Sean did his thing. And I thought, you know, they've got people who are watching this stuff.
Yeah.
And my wife said, just give it a go. What have you got to lose? Because I am a bit of a OCD perfectionist, and I like to think that if I'm going to do something, let's try and do it well. But that's not my bag, you know, video. This is something that I've learned as a necessity.
Yeah.
So I got started and did a few videos. I thought, let's just talk a little bit about the stuff that dealers would talk about, you know, kind of advice, because that seems to be harder to get hold of that. They're not so accessible these days. So let's start talking a little bit about how to put together a stereo system. That got a handful of views. And then I did the first one, I think, on I did one on speaker setup or cables, one of the two, and they just went nuts. They just went exploded. I think I did one on my top 5 tweaks.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, and they're terribly shot, but you know,
it
is what
matter.
It is.
If you look at my, I mean, I don't think I'm particularly good at this either.
No,
but if you look at my first videos, I was out on the back porch, and I had a camera because I did stills. I would do a little bit of photography here and there, and so I set the ISO up, and then, you know, the sun comes out from a cloud. And all of a sudden, like the entire half side of the frame is just overexposed. It's like white light coming from the sun, and I'm like, I'm really not good at this. I didn't know how to edit. I still don't really know how to edit.
Your picture quality is superb these days, picture and sound quality.
Well, if you do something 200 times, you're not better than the first time. You're probably doing the wrong thing, right?
Yeah, well, and congratulations, man. You just, you know, you've done fantastically well. It's really good to see.
Well, thank you. Proof that any idiot on YouTube or on out there can do this.
No, not at all.
I do have one question though. At what point did the teddy bear stop being featured in your videos? And if you don't know, so I was in Taryn's. I watched a lot of YouTube before I ever started this, and I'm watching Taryn. And I got a big kick out of it, out of your videos. But there was some of the early videos just had this teddy bear sitting on the couch listening to music. And it wasn't for like 10 seconds. It was a solid minute of this teddy bear listening to music. And at what point did you think, I think I'm going to take the teddy bear out?
Well, I think the real question is, at what point did I think that was a good idea in the first place? But I think, you know what, I was just having a laugh. I just thought at that stage, that was very, very, very early on. I was doing sound clips. It was before I even had, I think I had maybe 100 subscribers or something. Yeah. And I thought, you know what, I just want to play some music. I don't believe that sound clips, you can judge stereo systems through YouTube, you know.
Well, how can you? I mean, you don't know what's on the other end. You don't know about the microphone. You don't know. I mean, there's so many different variables that go into a sound clip. Yeah. And because I get that question, why don't you do sound clips? I'm like, there's zero chance that I can control that. Like, I don't know what's coming out the other end.
Yeah. So it's not a way to evaluate gear. And I think even this week, I got a couple of comments saying, can I hear them? I think one of them said, stop talking, let's hear them. And you get, you know, I'm thinking, well, okay, where do I go? Where do I start with this one? Yeah. But, you know, I do find them entertaining. And I think people are curious just to look at people's systems and see how they're set up. And rather than look at a picture of it, and also what kind of music they listen to. So they're great entertainment value, but that once the channel got monetized, that had to go. Yeah. But the teddy was there because I needed to plonk something in the listening position. Otherwise, it was my couch, just looking at an empty couch. So you know,
I got a big kick out of that.
Yeah, no, it was there. And then I had the Actually, I think you picked it up right, because I thought it was a rocking cow, but it is actually, I think, a rocking reindeer.
Yeah, it's a reindeer, man.
Yeah, I've owned it only for 20 odd years, well, 15 years.
Well, cows and reindeers, pretty similar.
Yeah, they are.
So what
So that
kind of
was
music? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
So that was quite fun. Sticking
Yeah.
that on, if you want to do a 30-second clip, just put that and have that rocking like that. So that was quite cool.
No, I've been a big fan of yours since the very beginning. You talked about music though. What kind of music, do you listen to? What do you like?
I generally listen. I have a very wide remit of music that I listen to. So I have very conventional tastes in lots of different genres. But most of the time, my critical listening, I listen to music to chill out and relax. There are times when we have it for entertainment and fun and all of that stuff, and it's great to have the system. And there's times when I just want to rock out, and I'll stick some AC/DC on, or Rage Against the Machine or something.
All right.
But and I quite a little bit of Led Zeppelin and stuff like that. But most
Proper
of the time,
British music.
there's some good American bands that are out there.
Listen, man, I love Led Zeppelin. I was listening to some today. I love Zeppelin.
I've got some. I was fortunate enough to get handed some high-res stuff from a guy in the trade. I know, friend of mine in the trade who used to use it for demos. And there's a whole load of DSD and high-res stuff that, and I'm not saying that it sounds better because it's high-res, but there's a bit of care probably been taken in the mastering and process. But and there's a lot of vinyl rips of in high-res, and some of those sound awesome for some of those old recordings. So, and I've got a whole load. I think I've got almost the entire AC/DC library, all of Led Zeppelin, and loads of Dire Straits, lots of the classic rock brands, because I think he was a big fan of that. And
well, feel free to put that on a server and shoot me over a link to that.
I will. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool, man.
Stuff. That's good stuff. So, what you've been up to? Tell us a little bit about what's been happening. You never stop. You're like a machine.
Well, I try. I was actually listening. I saw your email pop up and I'm like, oh, because I had thought about it this morning. But my brain is, I don't know. If I get sent to the store to get milk, I'll walk in there and I'll come out with 5 things and none of them are milk. So it's kind of the same thing. This morning I knew we were going to sync up, and I'm sitting here, I'm listening to this little amp right here, and I'm just listening and all of a sudden I'm like, oh gosh, I'm supposed to be online with Taryn right now. I apologize for that.
No worries, mate.
I'm just making videos.
It's mid-afternoon when you're shooting this over there, but it's late in the evening, so the little one's upstairs in bed, and I'm sitting there chilling, relaxing. I had a little glass of wine tucked away somewhere.
Good.
So it's wine o'clock over here in the UK.
Well, very good. Well, good. Yeah, I just making videos, man. Enjoying myself, having a blast. So coolest thing in the world. What got you into hi-fi though, like personally, like before the channel ever started?
Yeah, it's a long time ago. So back in my parents moved into the house that they live in now when I was 11, and when I was 14 there was a local hi-fi shop down the road. My dad took us down there to buy a proper system, and my dad's from Kenya. He's Asian Indian from Kenya. The guy who was the owner of the shop was also an Indian from Kenya, so they had a connection. They actually went to the same school in Mombasa.
No kidding.
And even though they were a few years apart, so they just became friends. And they had a CD collection there. So my dad used to go down once a week and pick out some CDs, and we bought this system, and I was just hooked. Yeah. From that point, as soon as I heard that system, any system in that shop, and not the one we bought, because we bought one eventually afterwards, but I went down to have a look, and as soon as I heard systems there, I was just like, wow, this is amazing. I just instant like, oh my god, and hooked for life. What was the system like that your dad brought home for you guys? So he's still got bits of it. We changed little things. I think there was a CD player, I think I did a video on it, and I think I said it was a Marantz CD63. But before that, there was a Yamaha CD player.
Okay.
It was a Marantz PM40 amplifier.
Okay.
So you're talking kind of mid-late 80s.
Mm-hmm.
And we had the Tannoy DC 2000 speakers, which they still own. So the CD player died, and I think they got a Nakamichi CD player, which they've owned for best part of quarter of a century. And the PM40 SE got upgraded to a PM52, which, do you know Ken Ishiwato passed away, the legendary Marantz designer?
Yes, yeah, and because I think Rotel just did an amplifier basically kind of as a tribute, and I think the amp is actually called Tribute. I think it's the A11 or something like that.
A11 Tribute. I've heard the name, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he did a version of the 52 where he copper chassis and did some improvements. So we got that, and that's been sat there for a quarter of a century, still going strong.
Yeah.
So, it's changed around the edges, but the speakers are the original speakers that they bought. The amp and the CD player have been updated, but not for 25 years.
You're right. So your dad pulled you into this when you were a kid. Was there anything that you saw at the store that you're like, that's going to be, I need that, I want that, it's too expensive now, but eventually I'm going to get that?
Well, what happened was I started when I turned around 15, 16, I started working in that store periodically. On Saturdays, not all the time, on holidays. And they used to be a big Earl's Court show, so I used to go there. So I was in that shop all the time, listening to stuff. And because I worked there part-time, not seasonally, part-time, over the years, I basically was, considered one of the boys there. So you got access to gear and things. So when I had a system in uni, when I went away to Cardiff to uni, so I bought a system to have in uni, and that connection was always there with that shop for as long as it lasted. It's gone now, sadly. But yeah, so I had a bit of retail experience, even though it was, periodic, over probably the best part of 10 years. Well, maybe eight years. So it was pretty cool. See it from that perspective.
Yeah. Excuse me. When so you've reviewed a fair number of products at this point. Are there any that you got in that just completely surprised you?
Ooh, if so, completely surprised me.
Yeah,
I don't tend to get surprised so often. I think it's because I've been around doing this for so long, 30 years, and I've always had, because I had that connection with that shop, and I had friends who then basically, I got a friend of mine who I introduced to that shop and worked there full time when he finished uni. And he then went on to have a career in the industry.
Okay.
And through that, I met a couple of people. So I've always had some kind of contact over the years with the industry. So I've always had the opportunity to see gear and get hold of gear, because a friend comes around and he says, try this, DAC, or try this amp or whatever. So so I've always had quite a bit of exposure to bits and pieces. So I don't get, but what was really that, you mentioned that power supply. That was one of the things that was very surprising, because I didn't expect that at all.
Yeah.
I've got a Orlik Aries mini streamer. It made sense to get rid of the cheap switch mode power supply, because that just radiates noise throughout your entire system. So I got an i-Fi switch mode power supply, which is a low noise, power supply that
I think I have one on the desk somewhere up here. You can't see it, but there's just a mountain of garbage right here, Taryn. Somewhere in here is an i-Fi switch mode power supply.
Yeah, I've deliberately set up this camera angle so that you can't see all the stuff around here as well. So so there was an improvement, which because I still, people think that I'm not an objectivist. I kind of sit between the two camps. I believe in objective data. Science and engineering is my background. But there's a reason why the low noise switch mode power supply should work better, and it does. What I didn't expect is when I switched from the 50 quid i-Fi to a 350 pound linear power supply, that improvement. And that I felt was more noticeable, because I had the Hugo One that my cousin has,
Mm-hmm.
That had just been in and out of my system for a couple of days. And I felt that the power supply on the streamer made more difference than switching between the Chord Mojo and the Chord Hugo one.
Wow.
And I thought
So
it wasn't.
with the linear power supply, did you notice like an increase in the soundstage depth, better imaging?
Yeah, just everything that comes to relates to a little bit of precision and timing and control just snapped a little bit more into focus. So the separation was a little bit better. I mean, it's a long time ago, so I don't want to probably just say it for the sake of it, but the clarity was definitely noticeably better. The refinement was definitely noticeably better. I would imagine that the soundstage, if I went back and did the comparison now, it's been almost probably a year or so, I would imagine there'll be differences between soundstage width and depth as well. I find that even when I plug in the i5 parallel mains conditioner, and the objectives will turn around and say, well, that's just nonsense. But my belief is that we haven't figured this out. We measurements reveal a lot, and they can tell you what's wrong, but they can't tell you everything, and they won't tell you whether you enjoy a piece of equipment when you listen to it.
Yeah, I find it really interesting. So John Darko has a podcast, and I was listening to, he did an interview with Karl-Heinz Fink, I believe.
Finch,
Finch,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
And they were talking about measurements, and they were talking about frequency response. And Carl said, I'll see a frequency response and there'll be almost an insignificant difference, but yet I hear a major difference, when I'm sitting here and actually listening to the music. And I found that kind of telling from somebody that well-designed speakers, right? So even something that can look very similar can sound drastically different. I got a kick out of that.
I think he's done quite a bit of work recently with Wharfdale.
Yeah, and he was with Q Acoustics, I think, prior to that, correct?
Is he? Yeah, it might be Q Acoustics. Maybe.
Well, no, I think now he is with Wharfdale, but I think he
yeah.
designed a lot of the enclosures for Q, I believe.
Right. Yeah, no, he's well known in the industry as one of the go-to guys to get speakers designed right. So there's either a massive conspiracy going on where the entire industry, every single pretty much manufacturer, retailer, and hardline audiophile is in on this conspiracy where they're basically trying to pull the wool over everybody's eyes.
Yeah, it's Illuminati, audio Illuminati.
Yeah.
Or
there's something to it.
Taryn. Yeah.
Or there's something to it. And, when you look at the research, you can, the research has to be taken into context of what it's been done. One study done 30 years ago highlights certain differences. And, there's not been that much research done in terms of settling the debate, I don't think, definitively.
Yeah.
But anyway,
we get
ourselves into a lot of trouble talking about this stuff.
I don't know. I don't think so. I think there's room for both, right? I think the answer's in the middle, right? It seems that like the answer is always in the middle. Yeah. And I was just doing, I was kind of writing some notes on this amp, and I looked up the measurements. I'll look at measurements after, I listened to something for a while, but there was another podcast, and I think it was Darko's, and he interviewed the designer of the PS Audio Phonostage. Yeah. And they were talking about feedback and negative feedback loops, and that you can design an amp to the point where just pushing the distortion down to nothing.
Yeah.
But yet when they did that, he listened and he didn't like it. He said, this doesn't sound good. So they kind of stepped it, took it easy on the feedback loops, brought up the distortion a little bit, and it was actually sonically more pleasing than one that was super low distortion. So I found that interesting too.
Yeah, so this is the old this is a long-standing debate in audio that basically what negative feedback does. So negative feedback, one of the benefits is better damping factor. The other thing is it drives down distortion. So in the measurements, if you put a lot of negative feedback on an amplifier or any product, a DAC, you can get very low levels of noise, THD plus noise, whether you're measuring dynamic range or signal to noise ratio, they're all slightly different variations of, how low the noise are. The traditional tube aficionados and the people who specially advocate the kind of purist tube designs, so something like, I think, is it called a Zen amplifier or something that a few people have reviewed? It's something over in the States, but there's single-ended triode, low watt. Is it a Zen?
Yeah, it's the
what's it called? I think there's a couple.
No,
of
I know
people
it's a company out of Pennsylvania, I think. Zen Triode or something like that. I know. Deckware. That's
Deckware. That's it. It's a Deckware Zen. That's it. So that's the simplest kind of tube amplifier, where you generally tend to run triode tubes. They tend to be very linear in their response. Okay. And because they're very linear in the response, you don't need a lot of negative feedback. You can get away with zero negative feedback. You're not going to get the distortion that you get from a class D amplifier. That levels are low, but acceptable levels of very low distortion from that design. They can't produce an awful lot of power, but a characteristic. Now, I'm not sure if you reviewed it, but I think you may have. I reviewed the Rysong. Oh God, what kind of name is that? Rysong Boyu Range A50 Mark III. That is and the reason I picked that one up, after I asked for the Wilsington R8, and then afterwards, that was the one that appealed to me, because that is relatively inexpensive, by far the cheapest, zero negative feedback, single-ended triode tube amplifier I've come across. And the sound staging ability of that amplifier is just staggering.
Which one was that? Was that because I had the MT34 Mark II, and then...
Yeah, they do quite a few, but the others are all basically running either KT88s or EL34s or some other tubes, which are not triodes, and they're not the same design. So they're push-pull. Push-pull, you have... The reason why you can tell it's a single-ended triode is that you've probably only got 3 tubes, 1 tube per channel, and a rectifier tube if they're using tube rectification, which most of them probably will have, to change the DC to AC to DC. So that is the purest form of tube amplifier, and the benefit of that is that it has what tube aficionados who use those with high sensitive speakers say is that sound staging and the timing ability of that amplifier is something sensational. I thought, well, let's find out if they're right, because I haven't really never really heard them in shows. I never really tried one at home, and it's got some limitations because of its power. It doesn't really handle the bass very well, but wow, there's something in that. Now I'm not going to make a sweeping statement based on reviewing one product, but and the other side of the argument, just for balance, is that Class D amplifiers, for example, people have always criticized them sounding unnatural, and one of the criticisms has been because, well, traditionally they used to have this problem with load variance. Frequency response used to change with the load. That's been dealt with, but one of the other issues was inherent in the Class D design is a lot of negative feedback. Now, the person who's probably most prolific in pushing Class D designs and moving them forward in recent years is Bruno Pudzi's. So he's the guy who developed the Hypex UCD modules that you'll see in the cheaper Class D NAD products. And then the Encore ones, Hypex Encore ones, which is an improvement on that design. He then he puts that into the master, M10, the master series. I think NAD just launched their C399, which is the cheapest amplifier they've ever had with the Encore modules. So he's improved that design, and then he went on to Purify and did something there, and then he's involved in the Mola. And his argument is that if Class D is implemented right, it's not the negative feedback that's the issue, it's the way in which it's implemented. And he did a white paper on it, which is very technical, and I couldn't understand most of it, quite frankly, but I picked up enough.
Well, I have no chance then.
So it's, but he's a very clever guy, and they might figure it out, but that's been the traditional debate, is that, well, actually, you know, you need to get away from these feedback designs if you don't want to kill the very, not measurable, this is subjective
Perceptive,
value, perceptions, not what you pick up on the measurements. But if you want sound staging ability and this very fine timbral, nuanced, then you need to get away from the high feedback designs.
What do you prefer? Do you have any Class D in the house?
Yeah, I'm yet to find a Class D amplifier that I'm happy with tonally from a personal perspective. I recognize they do some very, very clever things, and I think at certain price points they are equally as competitive as any other design. So I think they make an awful lot of sense for home cinema. I think they make an awful lot of sense at moderate prices and even kind of reasonably high prices. But when you're chasing nuance, you know, you can put together, I think, something like a system for 1,500 quid that does everything pretty much these days. You know, you can get a pair of decent speakers and which will cover all the bases, and then what you're just doing is adding either greater scale, or greater refinement. And there, you know, there are other things, but
sure.
You know, I'm
in a nutshell, I get it.
In a nutshell, yeah. So, you know, that nuance that you want to try and pull out, that's when I think I haven't come across. I haven't reviewed enough, but I haven't come across Class D amplifiers. So, you know, the people who like Harbeths and like, you know, the British classic monitors and that's all about that timbral nuance and tonality. The people who go after tonality, once you've got the bases covered, they're really looking for that last word in tonality at the price. I haven't found a Class D amplifier that can compete with the best Class A Bs or Class As in that regard.
I got you.
Yeah.
What are some of the speakers that you like? Let's say less than 1,000 quid or less than 1,000 US.
Yeah. So I think I like the PSBs. So
okay.
I like PSBs. So they're very even-handed in what they do. Super clear. I think Paul Barton so Paul Barton's the founder of PSB. It's part of Lembrook now. It's a Canadian company. So I tend to like them. They do all the basic stuff very well. They're very clean, dynamic, uncolored speakers, which is what you look for.
So it's some people look for. I like a little bit of butter, Taryn.
Yeah,
butter on it.
Yeah, no, you're right.
I'm kidding.
It's what I look for in the speaker around that price. Just cover the bases. And I like the Wharfedale stuff. I think there's some really good stuff that's come out of Wharfedale. And I think which one in particular, I like their Dentons.
Yeah,
they've been around for a while, so that's got a bit of butter.
Yeah, that's what I've heard.
Yeah.
I like the 11 series. I just did actually today. I released their their entry level stuff, the D320, which is actually being discontinued. I was shocked how good that speaker was. I'm like, this is really, really good.
Yeah,
it wasn't super detailed on top, but it was most of the speakers in that price category have a tendency to be a little bit harsh on the top end. Some peaks, you know, in that 2K region can be a little fatiguing. This is kind of the opposite of that, a little bit smoother. It's very good.
Well, you've got a lot more experience in that area than me. The thing that I've struggled with, and the thing I was keen to do, was to review more accessible gear when I started the channel. It's not the way it's turned out over the last year or two, because so I wouldn't say with any authority, but the other stuff that I've liked when I've heard it elsewhere as a snapshot has been the Q acoustic stuff. So I've been really keen to get their more affordable prices, but for whatever reason, when you contact these manufacturers, especially, I think it's more of an issue here in the UK than it is in America, because we're always a little bit behind the curve in terms of catching you guys up in terms of knowing where things are going. So YouTube, I think my impression is, certainly talking from people like Sean and to a couple of other people, is that manufacturers are a bit more switched on to YouTube in America than they are in the UK.
Okay.
So my response generally when I contact a manufacturer in the UK is used to be categorically, we haven't got a clue who you are, and kind of as soon as you mention YouTube, you know, they think, okay, well, that's all right, that we'll get in touch. Don't call us, we'll call you.
Right,
Generally,
right, yeah.
generally the cut. That's
Yeah.
changed a little bit. I think it's starting to change, and
Yeah.
the channel's a little bit more established now. So there's certainly, but it's still really hard to widen the remit of manufacturers who I can get products from.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to just keep reviewing stuff from the same people. So and then when you do get in touch, they generally want to push their newer product. So
Right.
Yamaha, for example, and all of these, you know, or Q Acoustics. So you say, well, actually, let's have a look at your new product first. Okay, I'll have a look at that. Let me see that. And then when you're trying to get the more affordable stuff, it's not been so straightforward because, you know, all this COVID stuff.
Yeah.
They can, you know, and so it's been more of a challenge to get the more accessible gear in, and I'm still beating the drum to get that done. You do a fantastic job of doing that. I think it's a great service you provide in that regard.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I just got the stuff that I could afford. Oh, there's my i5 power supply right there. It's right
Yeah,
in front of me.
I've got one connected on mine actually. I've got the linear one, and I had use that one with the Mojo cord. Mojo, and according to Rob Watts of Cord, it shouldn't make a difference, but I think it does.
Yeah. You know what's interesting is when I got that power supply, and I had a topping D50S little DAC, and I used the stock power supply, and it was after your video. Actually, you're the reason why I went out and bought that. So I bought the i5. And I don't know if I even had a channel at that point, but I was doing a quick switcheroo, and I'm sure it wasn't done the right way, but I did notice a difference. Yeah. Now, I don't know, like I couldn't say this one's better or this one's worse. I just said, oh, I do hear something different. Yeah. And I would assume that the i5 probably sounds better. But you mentioned it, you know, we have short-term memory when it comes to hearing. And it was the only thing that I could put my finger on was there is a difference. I don't know if it's better or if it's worse, but there is a difference. And that was when I was like, okay, maybe there's something to this. Now, I usually don't get into it on my channel because, well, I just don't think I'm there yet that I could, you know, intelligently convey that to the audience. But for sure, I even have one of my patrons used to make cables, and he sent me some cables based on Mogami, or they use Mogami cables. Yeah. And RCAs. And I had them in there, and I'm like, I think this sounds a little bit clearer. And I was like, no way. And I literally said to myself, no way is this cable making a difference. But sure enough, I think it did. And I don't talk about it very much, but I think it did make a difference.
Yeah. No, I think there's, like I say, there's a lot of people that are wrong. There's a lot of people in this conspiracy if we've all got it wrong, or we're all confirmation. It's all placebo and confirmation biased, and you know, it's a lot. You know, whatever it is.
It's like the Matrix. It doesn't matter if it's real or not.
Yeah,
if it seems real, if it tastes real, if it sounds real, and it's real.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Tell me about the Denafrets. I know the Aries too. I absolutely love it. I have it right here. Yeah. And to me, that was the most important piece of electronics, and maybe even hi-fi gear, that I've ever heard. Yeah. Simply because it made the biggest impact on everything. And I know you've heard it. What are your thoughts on it?
So you asked me earlier, actually, and I couldn't think of it at the time, as to what products I was genuinely surprised by. Okay. So the other two, one would be the Denafrips Aries, and the other one would be the Acoustic Energy AE1s. Okay. So let's talk about the Aries then. So the Aries, I put that on. I thought my Mojo was a good DAC. I've listened to a lot of DACs, and I know what its limitations are. It's colored a little bit in the sound. It's got that warm kind of cozy, and it's a little soft in the bass, but it has a very organic fluid quality. I'm talking about the Mojo. Mm-hmm. I wish it was a little less colored, because in a highly resolving system, it shows its limitations in terms of the coloration it brings. It's just a bit too romanticized and a little bit too soft in the bass and a touch rolled off in the highs. But it's gone up against many, internal DACs inside Hagel products, amps that cost, £3,000 plus, standalone DACs at £1,000 and held its own.
Yeah.
When I connected the Aries, there was just no comparison. Just no comparison. The Aries just night and day better in every regard. Where I thought the Mojo was good, the Aries was better. And I just thought, I wasn't expecting it. I was expecting this R2R ladder DAC, which, because of like I say, I come to it generally. It's the channel that's probably through this channel that I've become less of a hardened objectivist. I was probably 2-3 years ago more of a hardline objectivist than I have been since I started the channel.
Is that because you've heard more products?
Yeah, exactly that. You hear them in your own. You can't tell when you're looking at listening to stuff at shows or in dealer demos, because you haven't got enough reference points. You can only tell if you change one component at a time in your system.
Right.
So, and I would have approached this hobby in a much more objectivist way 3 years ago than I would today. And it's just because of what I've experienced, and the Denafrips was one of them where I didn't expect a lot. I thought this is going to be another product that's been hyped around by everybody. It's an R2R ladder DAC. It's old technology, doesn't measure. Well, I bet you won't measure that great. And I bet you it's got a nice, warm, cozy sound, but I've heard loads of DACs like that aren't that resolving. Yeah. But it does everything that you could want for a DAC. I just did my product of the year review today, not today, a week ago. And, the Pontus was right up there, and the Hollow Audio Spring 3 level 2, both R2R ladder DACs at the next level, or a couple of levels above, 2.5 grand. And, they're night and day above everything else I've heard. So there's something to it, isn't there? These R2R ladder DACs.
Yeah. For me, it was, and I talked to Lachlan at Passion for Sound just recently. Yeah. I don't know if you're familiar with his channel.
I actually watched your video actually with him. Yeah. So it was really good. Yeah. No, I'm familiar with his channel. He does a really good job with headphones.
He's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, he is.
For me, it was when I put the Denafrips in, and I probably have a dozen speakers here at any given time. Most of them are my personal speakers that I hold over for reference at different price levels. And I had a pair of Klipsch, and I get it. Klipsch is, a popular speaker. I understand it. I have them in the house, and I enjoy my Klipsch. But I had the RP 500Ms in, and for me, that speaker can get a bit fatiguing around the 2K area. So I feel like there's it's really forward at that point.
Yeah.
And the most telling thing for me is when I'm doing something else and the music snaps me out of whatever I'm doing. And I had the Klipsch on there, and I was running the Denafrips, and I wasn't even critically listening. And something happened, and I looked over, and I'd never heard that sound come through the Klipsch before. Yeah. And it was on an amp that I already excuse me. It was on an amp that I had, a lot of time with. And I'm like, this thing just completely changed the way the Klipsch sound. And at that point, I'd already heard space and air and placement in the soundstage. I'd already heard that with the Denafrips, and it was already doing a better job. I can't say better. It was doing a completely different job than I had heard come from a Delta Sigma DAC before. Yeah. It just was organic and real and in space. And that's not even taking in consideration the sonic characteristic. This is just the immersive characteristic. And it just kind of dawned on me that it really took me out of listening to music through speakers to being somewhat of at a performance. And it was at that point, I'm like, this is the most important piece of equipment I've ever heard, because up to that point, everything had been, for the most part, two-dimensional. Yeah. When I put the Denafrips in, everything became three-dimensional, and it was a paradigm shift for me in this hobby.
No, it's one of those products that every so often comes along that just moves the goalposts, not by a little bit, or shifts the needle not by a little bit, by a long way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's that and the Acoustic Energy AE1s are hands down the two most impressive products that I've heard since I started the channel. And it's exactly what you say. You know, normally if you want that warm, cozy sound, you can get that from a Delta Sigma DAC. I've heard Delta Sigma DACs that actually produce that kind of sound, but it comes at the expense of clarity. And you can get a little bit of soundstage depth, but almost in every single chip-based DAC that I've heard sounds relatively flat in terms of soundstage compared to when you listen to, you know, an R2R ladder DAC. But the Denafrips Aries 2 has refinement, it's neutral in tonality, it's, like you say, its ability to immerse you in a sound field. It does it all, you know, and, you know, I'd have been quite happy with that at the front of my system until I got the Pontis, which I've managed to hang on to for about 5 months. Of Alvin, who's the global distributor, I said to him, yeah, he said to me, Taran, I did the Pontis review. He says, Taran, do you want to hang on to it and try out the digital to digital converter? I said, yes, even before I looked at what the digital to digital converter was and what it did. I thought, yeah, no, send me. If I can hang on to that for a little bit longer, you send me what you like.
Yeah.
I'm joking, but no, you know, it's, I did that. And so I'm going to have to contrive some idea to hang on to that for a little bit longer now that that's been done.
Yeah.
So
well, I've had a lot of the viewers and my patrons pick up the Denafrips, and almost in every case it was the same thing. It was just a wow moment. And most of the guys in my patron, they don't have really expensive systems, right? So I think for them it was, some of them do, but you know, without exception, they were all very impressed with it. And I talk about it a lot, and people probably get sick of hearing me talk about it, but it's just a fantastic product.
No, I'm not one for hype, you know, and hyperbole and stuff like that. So I just, that is an amazing product. And the other one, like I say, is the Acoustic Energy AE1s. And it's not like I'm a fanboy of a particular brand. I've reviewed other Acoustic Energy products and they're good, but there's something about those active AE1s in terms of they do what you can say about the Denafrips in as far as DAC's concerned. That is a proper active speaker for £1,000, not a powered speaker, an active speaker. So you've got no passive crossover, and there's no fan. And also, I'm not convinced with digital active speakers where they've got DSP going on. I think DSP works at certain frequencies. I'm not sure convinced what it does at higher up the frequency range. I'm, you know, like I say, I'm prepared to have my mind changed about that because I haven't reviewed enough of them. But at the moment, I haven't found a digital active system that I've enjoyed listening to. But the analog ones, oh my God, ATC's cheapest one is $5,000. Well, acoustic, and I said to Ben at ATC, why don't you make a more accessible one? And you know, Acoustic Energy have done that essentially with the AE1s, which are $1,000. I think they might be a bit 1,200 quid, but that's just two speakers with amplification built in, and it's class. They could have gone class D amplification because it would have been cheaper. They didn't. They went class A B because they said it sounded better in their ears, to their ears, and they could have gone digital, but they didn't because they felt that analog sounded better. And I tend to, my experience thus far has borne that out. If you stick to a proper analog active speaker, they just do some fantastic things. And then you can do all your digital stuff, you know, outside the box, further up the chain. Yeah.
Well, that's what concerns me about DSP is if I have my DAC that I love, now you're taking that analog signal, you're converting it back to digital, and then you can do your thing and then spit it back out analog. I'm like, no, I want my DAC sound. Don't take away.
Well, also, if you put an analog source into these DSP based ones, they'll digitize it.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, my analog source out of my coming out of my DAC now becomes digital again.
Yeah. So yeah, that's right. They're redoing it again. But if you've got a turntable, it's basically digitizing your vinyl and then turning it back into analog again. And it has benefits. I mean, you know, the Buka A500 is immensely capable system in terms of dynamics and resolution, but it doesn't have natural tonality, you know, which is, I think I got that came as a little bit of surprise because Darko reviewed that, and I think it may have been even his product of the year, and then I got hold of it shortly afterwards and didn't think it was a bad product. It's you know, there's a lot of people who it's going to make very happy, but it had this particular trait. I kind of named it in that, and then you know that I think that got a little bit of attention, not in a good way. So everybody focuses on the negatives. If you say anything critical about a product, everybody homes in on that.
No, I get it for sure.
And I try to be as balanced as I possibly can. I don't review products I don't like. If I don't like a product, I send it back. You know, I'll tell them to pick it up, because you know, it's my opinion. I don't know if I've got it right, and I don't know if they've sent me that one product, and it might be that one product that might have an issue. So you know, I'm not here to affect other people's business in a negative way. So I'll review stuff I like. If it's good, I'll give it a recommended. If it's very good, I give it a highly recommended. And occasionally, if it knocks the ball out of the park, it'll get an outstanding. But if I don't like it, I send it back.
I'm probably should do more of that. I have done a few. One of them was an Amazon Basics speaker.
Yeah. Well, I don't think it's gonna affect Amazon.
Yeah, I think Jeff Bezos is gonna be all right.
Yeah, I think he'll be okay. Yeah.
But yeah, what's up next for you? You have a lot of good stuff in the pipe.
Well, I've got these Triangle 40th anniversary Comete, I think is the way maybe it's pronounced, those speakers. So horn tweeter, and then
they pretty efficient.
I think they're about 90 decibel sensitivity.
Okay.
So not too bad. I'm enjoying those, so I'm looking forward to getting that reviewed. I've got Denafrips's amps, the new Hades power I think it's called the Hades preamplifier. It's a fully balanced preamplifier, and the Thallo power amp. So that should be coming up. And the Q Acoustic powered speaker, the little
M20?
one, M20. I think you've reviewed that, haven't you?
Yeah, I did.
So that's here. So I haven't had a look at that, but that should be in their kind of ballpark of what they do very well. So I'm quite excited about reviewing that.
Yeah, I won't give it away. I don't know if you've watched it or not, but
I haven't. I don't watch. If it's here, I won't watch it.
Yeah,
I'll watch it. I watch it after I've done mine, but I don't want to be influenced by other people's
so I'm
opinions.
not going to talk about it, but yeah.
But that's coming. Yeah. So what you got coming up?
Oh goodness, little IEMA DAC, or excuse me, DAC amp, $115. You'd be surprised how good these are, man.
Yeah.
They're very, very, very good. And for Class D, it is the closest thing to an AB that I've heard. And not all AB amps sound the same, obviously.
No.
But there's something special about these little IEMA amps.
Okay.
And
what's IEMA? Is that where's that from?
China?
Who builds them? Okay, so it's one of those.
They use Texas Instruments mostly.
Yeah.
Amplifier chips and op amp chips.
Yeah.
And then I think they've made one with an STA amp chip.
Right. Yeah.
So
it's like the more kind of entry level SMSL type things, like the SA100, things like that, a similar type thing to that, presumably.
A little bit. SMSL uses a lot of Infineon chips, the 12070. IEMA kind of bucked the trend, and they use the Texas Instruments stuff. SMSL's M400 uses an STA chip as well, and that's a very good sounding amp. It's also $650 though, so it's a lot higher up in the. I think a lot of this stuff is coming back to power supplies. I think you can get away with using just about any amp chip you want if you implement the power supply properly, and if you use a decent op amp chip. I think the sound, the delta between AB and Class D is getting narrow and narrower in my experience on the low end. I had the NAD C338 in as well, and I think that's a Hypex module.
It's got the UCD. The C338 is a UCD, so it's the one below the Encore that I was talking about. Yeah,
and that was clean.
A good amp. good all-round amp. There's nothing to criticize that amp in any regard. It's just a very good all-rounder if you want a one-box solution at that price.
Yeah.
But I think you're right. I think I think in some levels it's probably possibly even better. You know, there's an advantage to Class D, because it's quite cost effective from that perspective. You're not having to pay for, if you've got switch mode power supplies and they're done reasonably well, and you haven't got to worry about the heat sinks and the big chassis and the big transformers. There's a big cost saving there, and you can produce a good Class D amp. I've heard good Class D amplifiers, you know, up and I think up to about this side of $2,000. You know, they compete very well. I think it's just then when like I say, it'd be interesting to see as you go higher up whether they can compete with the best Class ABs. But I think at kind of the more accessible price points, and even at, you know, reasonably high, when you're spending, you know, £1,000, 1,500 quid, they're right up there. They're right up there with the Class ABs.
Yeah. How do you consume your music? Do you mostly streaming, CD, or vinyl?
Yeah, so I've got Tidal, and I'll have a little bit of that, but I tend to stick to the music that I tend to stick to. I listen to a lot of stuff from 60s and 70s, so a lot of jazz from the 1950s, 60s, a lot of rock from the 70s, 80s not so much, but a little bit from the 80s. And I've got it all on a so I've got all mine on a USB drive.
Okay.
It's a Western, just a Western Digital 2 terabyte little USB drive, and that's got my music on it, and that's plugged into my Denafrips Aries Mini. That still sounds better than Tidal. So I haven't put it on a NAS drive because I don't want it over the network, because there is slight drop in performance between the physical hard media. Still sounds a little bit better than streaming. There's not a huge amount in it. I don't think anybody should lose any sleep over it, but when I AB'd it, I felt it was, you know, there is, you know, when we've got a system resolving enough to reveal those little nuances, you do miss that. So I still stick to hard media. I'm not switching CDs in and out, but it's plugged in directly. It's
plugged in directly to the Denafrips what?
So it's plugged in directly to my Auralic Aries Mini, my Auralic Aries Mini. Sorry, get my teeth in.
Okay.
That has a USB drive plugged into it, so it can access that. So it's acting almost like a server for that. And then I've got Tidal, which I stream as well. That's where I try and find, discover new music. And then if I like the music, I'll generally either buy the CD and rip the CD and put it onto the hard drive, or, you know, just buy it online and get and put it on the hard drive there. So I tend to have the stored physical media as opposed to it coming streamed via. So it's coming in through the hardwired route rather than the streamed route, and there is a difference in performance. Not much, but there is a little bit.
Yeah. What's your favorite band? And then I'll let you go.
Oh, I don't know if I've got a favorite band.
Give me 3, 4, 5 of them.
So you're probably gonna be disappointed here now.
No,
so I love Dire Straits.
No, they're good, man. I got them on my test track playlist.
Yeah, so I love Dire Straits. So if I was picking, so you're talking about just rock bands or?
Yeah, rock band stuff that most people would know of.
Yeah, okay. So not the obscure stuff. Okay, let's stick with stuff people would know. So I like Rolling Stones.
Okay.
So I like the Stones. So I'd have to go with, let's say, Pink Floyd would be up there.
Sure.
So it's that kind of genre of rock. That's me. That kind of Stones is kind of the earliest I go, and then it's kind of Dire Straits. I love the Eagles as well.
Okay.
So I love that Californian rock, that sinusoida rock.
Yeah. So if you had to pick either Pink Floyd or Led Zeppelin, which would it be?
Yeah. Oh, it depends on the mood.
But you can only have one. Only have one.
Yeah, that's tough, isn't it?
Yeah.
That is tough. Let me think. I'd probably go Pink Floyd.
Oh man. Okay. See, I'm on Team Zeppelin.
You'd go Zeppelin.
Yeah.
There's some great.
You know, for me, Zeppelin was kind of like, it was the precursor to kind of heavy metal. I mean, the riffs and the stuff that Robert Plant, or not Robert Plant, but Jimmy Page. And
Jimmy Page.
I mean,
yeah.
I was like, whoa. I mean, and I talked to one of my patrons who was older, and I asked him, like, the first time you heard Zeppelin on the radio, what was it like? Because that was so different from any of the other music.
Yeah.
And he was like, yeah, it was kind of, again, a sea change, a shift in the music. And it was heavy riffs and, you know, just crazy stuff, man. I really like Zeppelin.
I find it really, really hard to narrow it down because there's just so much great music that I love almost equally. And, you know, so that's a hard question to answer, but yeah, no, I think the way I answer it is, what do I spend more time listening to? So when I want to rock out, Led Zepp's there, but there's probably more times that I listen to Pink Floyd than I do Led Zeppelin. I'm more often in the mood to listen to Pink Floyd. It's not that I like them better. Yeah. It's just that I'm more often in that mood and that headspace where I'm listening to Pink Floyd or Dire Straits or maybe perhaps the Eagles, and you know, that's the way it works. But I've got such an eclectic taste of music, because I listen to Indian classical, I listen to semi-classical folk Indian as well as Western. I love all my blues singers, so I'm a big kind of blues fan, but generally the conventional artists, I don't tend to go into the kind of, and I love my jazz, but not the kind of experimental jazz. I like the kind of, you know, I like a little bit of Coltrane, Miles Davis, and the people that everybody know. Sure. So like, that's what I said, I've got very conventional taste in lots of different genres. Yeah.
What do you listen to right before you run out of the house to go participate in your rugby club?
That'll be a bit of Rage Against the Machine. Okay, that'll get you fired up. Yeah. That'll get you fired up. I love that album, the first one.
Yeah, I've got all their stuff on CD. I'm a big fan. I was actually there. I don't even know if it happened, but they had a tour canceled because of COVID, and then they were going to play some venues, El Paso, I think Texas, and then I think they're going to play in Arizona. I don't know if it happened or not, but I was thinking about going to their concert.
I like some of the kind of 90s British rock bands, you know, like Snow Patrol. They were probably a bit earlier, so they're the kind of 80s. Yeah. That's kind of a Darko thing, that 80s kind of rock thing. That's I'll leave him to that. That's, you know, like, and I should. That's my, you know, I grew up with that stuff, but I tend to like more the Snow Patrol, you know, Keane, people like that, the Verve. So yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure if you that kind of went across to the States that much. The Verve, did they?
No, I've heard them.
Yeah, you know, Blur and Oasis were the two biggest bands, but yeah, I prefer Blur to Oasis. The Oasis fans are just going to shoot me
right back there. I don't know if I have Oasis or not. I remember Oasis. I listened to them a lot.
So there was a bit of a 90s Brit rock pop revolution, and that I kind of quite like some of that stuff.
Yeah, it's good, all of it, for sure. Well, I don't want to take up more of your time. I could kind of BS with you all night long, but
yeah,
I'm
no,
sure
it's
you
good.
Gotta get some sleep.
No, I'm good. Yeah, no, it's been good to chat though.
Yeah, for sure, man. It was,
and I just want to say thank you for having me on.
Of course, man. Anytime.
Yeah, you've done, like I say, you've done fantastically well, man. I'm really pleased for you. You've done. You work. It's a lot of work that goes into it. Trust me, I know. And the output that you put out, it's something to be admired. The amount of the work ethic, and you know, you got something going on. Really, you know, there's something very engaging about the way you do it. So
I appreciate that.
Wish you every success with it.
Well, same to you, my friend. Same to you. You were and still are the channels that I watched, and you know, it was really interesting before the channel started. I'm watching British Audiophile up on the TV through Apple TV, big 65 inches of Taryn staring back at me,
out of focus.
With your teddy bear. And now I'm talking to him and through my computer, through the wonderment of the internets. So it's pretty cool, man. I appreciate you coming on, man.
No, you're more than welcome. Anytime. Right. You take care.
All right. Go subscribe if you're not subscribed to the British Audiophile. You can find him on all the social media networks.
Good luck.
Twitch. He's got a Twitch channel. Just kidding. All right, so I'm gonna stop recording.